Welcome, Life in the Fast Lane 2021 edition, and we are live for NASCAR 2021, and we're at Daytona this weekend. And we'll be here each and every week this entire NASCAR season right here on WagerTalk TV with your in-depth analysis for everything NASCAR on a weekly basis. Of course, I'm Steve Merril. I'll be your host this year. You can find me at WagerTalk.com. You can also find my co-host, Andy Lang, at WagerTalk.com, and also find Rocky Atkinson at sportsmemo.com. Before I bring in these two NASCAR experts, I just want to throw out a quick promo code. We have a fantastic offer for all the viewers, $100 discount on the full season of NASCAR Best Bets from both Andy and Rocky by using promo code CHASE21. Go to wagertalk.com for Andy's Best Bets. Go to sportsmemo.com for Rocky's. And once again, get $100 off. That's an extra $100 in your bankroll to start the NASCAR season with promo code CHASE21. And by the way, that is because Chase Elliott won the 2020 championship. Will he win the 2021 championship? That is something we will talk about here on today's show. And we also will dive into Daytona as well. First, so let me bring in my co-hosts, my co-NASCAR experts, as we'll be here each and every week this NASCAR season. First, Andy Lang, WagerTalk.com. Andy, great to see you. We've been doing a lot of football and basketball in between the NASCAR season, but I know you're excited as I am that NASCAR is finally here for 2021.
One of the best sports to make money on. Rocky and I showed it last year. I think we really surprised a lot of people with how good you can do in NASCAR. And I do want to say thank you to the audience. The feedback was incredible that they want a NASCAR show. And so without the audience, we would not have the show. We would not be here doing this. So seriously, thank you so much to the audience. We have a lot of new stories this year for NASCAR. We're missing a couple of big names from retirement. This is going to be a really crazy, exciting, fun NASCAR season. A lot of young guns, a lot of moving parts, and we are here to take advantage of all the lines and all the questions that you guys have. It's just going to be a great year, and there's nobody else I'd rather go through this year with than you two.
Yeah, and Andy, I know we have a lot of new viewers. Obviously, since we last spoke, sports betting is now legal in several more states in the United States since we last did a NASCAR episode this past fall. And there'll be a lot of first-time NASCAR bettors, and Rocky, we'll get into the takeaway of, how we handicap NASCAR. But what are some things you're looking at here, Rocky, for the 2021 season as a kind of a big-picture takeaway?
Well, we're going to look and see how Chase Elliott does again. Congratulations to him and his team on winning the championship last year. I was all over Harvick and Hamlin. They dominated most of the year. We made a lot of money on them. Been a lot of changes. I think Andy just mentioned some guys retired. Jimmy Johnson's not racing anymore. Clint Boyer's gone. Going to be sure to keep an eye on Harvick and Hamlin again this year when we have favorable matchups. Kyle Larson's back. He's a driver to watch. He moves into the number 5 car this year. He was high on my last list year before he got in trouble. We got to keep a close eye on Alex Bowman. He's moving into the 48 car. We made a lot of money last year fading Bowman. Will he do better, or will he remain somewhat overrated? That's a big question. Probably the biggest move of all, in my opinion, is Bubba Wallace, driving the 23 car for Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin. I think last year on last show we discussed this, and I said how Bubba, he just kind of sucks as a driver. But he must have watched some of our shows, as I saw an interview with him, and I think it might have been Kyle Petty, where they were sitting on motorcycles out in the open, and he just seemed to be very focused. So I believe he's out to prove the critics wrong. So I'll keep a close eye on him definitely this year.
Yeah, and that's going to be the big storyline, at least early in the season for me, guys, is the new team co-founded by Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin, the 23 team, and that will be Bubba Wallace's new ride. We've always questioned, can Bubba Wallace win if he has the right team, the right equipment? This is a guy that did well in the Truck Series, did okay at the Nationwide Xfinity Series. Really has not been a top 10 driver, obviously, at the Cup Series, but I'm not sure the 42 Petty team was giving him all, or the 43 Petty team was giving him all he needed, rather. But then again, it's a first-year team. Will they have the manpower, Andy Lang? Will they have the support? They're going to have some big-time backers. I assume this is a Toyota team being Hamlin, and you're going to wonder how much Gibbs Racing is going to play a part in it, Andy, because Gibbs Racing's been the most dominant team for about a decade now with their drivers.
Well, Michael Jordan is involved, Denny Hamlin is involved, and they landed 6 big-time sponsors. So resources, which are very hard to come by in NASCAR, resources will not be a problem. So I expect there's going to be a learning curve, of course. First-year team, there will be some kinks to work out, but I am with Rocky that he looks a little bit extra focused. Not that he wasn't focused before, but now there's no excuses. Now there's no there. You're done with, well, I'm not on a great team. You've got to start up. We saw Martin Truex have success when he was the lone driver on the Denver Mattress team, as it was known. So it can be done, and the pressure's on him. I think he's going to flourish. I think once the second half of the season hits, I think he's going to be good. Is he going to be in contention for a championship? Probably not. But I think he's going to be a major storyline, and as long as he runs in the top 10 consistently, I think he'll do justice to getting his own team and getting all the money and all the sponsors and big names. Christopher Bell moving to Joe Gibbs, I'm excited to see. I was bummed that Eric Jones lost his ride, got moved down to Richard Petty Motorsports. I like Eric Jones. I'll be excited to see what he does, and I'm excited to watch Team Penske. I think this might be the strongest team with Blaney, Keselowski, and Logano. I could see a lot of like top 7 finishes for all 3 of those guys. We saw last night Blaney looked really, really good. I think he's in store for a big year. And those are some guys I'll be looking at.
Yeah, I like the fact that you mentioned Penske, because that's a name I'm going to bring up here in a few minutes when we dig into Daytona. You know, Daytona, a very random race, obviously, but there's certain drivers that are always up there. Hamlin is definitely one of them who we've talked about. But if you look at some of the recent lap leaders, I mean, Keselowski, Logano, Blaney have all been strong, and that's because they've been fast. And Kevin Harvick, of course, was a Ford last year as well, Rocky. So, when I said Gibbs racing the most dominant team, I made sure I said the past decade, because I really couldn't say last year necessarily, because I really think Ford has caught them. And other than Hamlin, maybe, I feel like Harvick and those 3 Penske drivers were maybe the guys to beat last year on a weekly basis. Rocky, just one more maybe big picture takeaway for this season. And you touched on it earlier about Kyle Larson. I think that's the other big storyline for me. This, when we were doing the shows last summer, guys, I kept looking at past track history because we had no practice sessions to work with. And a guy that kept coming like as the second or third best driver on every track was Kyle Larson, and I'd have to scratch it out because he wasn't active. And there were so many times I would have liked to use him last year. He's back. I think he's going to be very focused as well, by the way. He's with the 5 team, as you said, Rocky, but let's keep in mind that was Bowman's 88 car. Bowman's now in the 48 car, as you mentioned. So technically, Kyle Larson's now in the 88 Bowman car. He'll have number 5 on it, the old Kellogg's car from Terry Labonte. And by the way, Christopher Bell is now in as Andy's the 43 car. That was Bubba Wallace. And I think Jones is a very talented driver, truck and Xfinity. So now we're going to find out something about Bubba Wallace, guys. If Jones comes out of the gate the first couple of weeks and competes strong for that 43 team, I think that tells me Wallace wasn't a good driver. Whereas if Jones really struggles, that tells me maybe Wallace could be a good driver. So there's going to be a little transitive property there, how Jones does as far as how I handicap Wallace. But Rocky, what's your big picture takeaway for 2021, especially with Kyle Larson? Will he be a guy you're looking to play? By the way, our friends at William Hill have told us he's one of the most bet on drivers right now for the Daytona 500 as far as some money and tickets. So the early money, and I would think that's probably some sharp money, has been on Kyle Larson so far, Rocky.
Yeah, I actually don't like Larson here in Daytona this week, but for the season, I'll be looking to play on him an awful lot. Like you said, he's kind of going into the Bowman car. Larson is way better than Bowman ever thought about being, and he's a very good driver. He very possibly could be a top 5 driver this year. He's definitely one to watch and to keep an eye on, and we'll be looking for some matchups that we can use him against, fading maybe somebody like Bowman or somebody. And I'll definitely be playing on him a lot this year, I'm sure.
So, guys, before we dig into Daytona, let's one more big picture takeaway here for you, Andy. Are there any season futures you might look at? I'm not a huge proponent of playing future bets in any sports for a few reasons. First of all, your money is tied up for several months. And with NASCAR, it's really bad. You're talking about 9 months that your money's going to be tied up here from February to mid-November. And then on top of that, you're normally getting skewed payoffs. You'd be better off just, money line parlaying guys once they make the playoffs. And then for our new viewers, the way the NASCAR postseason works, there's 3 race elimination stages. And once you get down to the second to last race, whoever the top 4 drivers are going into the final race are the only 4 that can win it. So as Rocky pointed out earlier, Harvick and Hamlin won about half the races last summer, yet Chase Elliott wins the final race and wins the championship. So, and Harvick wasn't even in the final, and he was the most dominant driver all season. So NASCAR futures for me, guys, are as tricky, if not more tricky, than any of the future sports. With that said, Andy, if I was going to play one, I'd want to look for a big plus money long shot maybe. So any thoughts on the futures, big picture, but also maybe more importantly, Andy, any maybe a long shot that's not a top 5 or top 10 guy you'd sprinkle a teeny bit on and then maybe hedge out if you could?
Well, that's the thing. You touched on it. Normally when you take futures in, say baseball, if you get like, just say the Padres, you love the Padres and they have some injuries in their bullpen and you get them at like 35-1 and they make the playoffs. You have a lot of wiggle room in the playoffs when you can bet it, you can hedge against them. It's not the case in NASCAR. So when I go to the futures tab, I just scroll right past through it. Just scroll through it. I mean, they have Chase Elliott at plus 550 to win the championship again. I mean, there's absolutely no value. Rocky and I bet similar styles. We stick to head-to-head matchups. That's where the value is. There is no reason to tie your money up from February all the way into the fall on a NASCAR future. So this is, if there was ever a sport to never bet a long-term future, it is NASCAR. Stick to head-to-head matchups.
Yeah, and Rocky, I'm looking at some of the odds at different sports books around the world. At one of them here, we've got the top 7 drivers are all 8-1 or less. So, I mean, your money's going to be tied up for 9 months with guys like Harvick, Hamlin, Elliott, Logano, Busch, Keselowski, Truex. Then you get Kyle Larson at 12-1, Ryan Blaney at 14-1. I do think Blaney has a little bit of value because I think he was as fast as anybody last year. But even at 14-1, Rocky, it's not enough for me to tie my bankroll up for 9 months. As Andy said, you can roll that over on a weekly basis and make a lot more with the head-to-head matchups of the weekly races. But one guy I will throw out to you, though, which catches my eye, I'm looking for these long shots. A guy like Cole Custer, 66-1, he made the playoffs last year, kind of by luck. But one guy at 50-1 is Christopher Bell, and he is in that 20 car now. He's a guy I think could definitely win a race and get in, and then maybe you got a little hedge room. But just big picture takeaway, Rocky, on futures, are they worth looking at, any long shots like Bell or somebody that you might consider?
I don't think so. I'm like Andy. I pass them right by. I wait on the head-to-head matchups to come out every week, and we take advantage of that. I don't play futures. Like you said, you're tying your money up for so long, 9 months in NASCAR, and it's hard to pick. I mean, it really is. Last year I was on Harvick and Hamlin all year, and you see what happened. Chase Elliott snuck in there and won the championship. So I just pass it up.
Yeah, and that's a good point about Elliott. This is a guy that wasn't even in the top 2 or 3 futures all year, and then he wins that final race, and you could almost get the last couple of races of the season, just money line parlaying him on those couple of races, you would have made a much bigger return than the 8-1 or whatever he probably was going into the playoffs. Viewers out there, now we got a lot of them. First of all, we want to talk about how we handicap NASCAR. We're going to do that with the Daytona breakdown in just a moment. But keep in mind, these guys are using head-to-head matchups. You also have odds to win the race, future odds. But both Andy and Rocky specialize in head-to-head matchups. Both hit nearly 70% of their head-to-head matchups last year in NASCAR. No other sport, football, baseball, or basketball, do you even consider hitting 70% long term? But in these niche sports like NASCAR, it can be done, and there's tremendous value. It cracks me up. Less people bet NASCAR and watch NASCAR, yet it's probably the best money-making sport out there for all of us. And once again, if you use Chase21, you're going to get a $100 discount for both Andy and Rocky. You can combine them both, get them both, save $200 combined with both of them with Chase21. Andy Lang's at WagerTalk.com. Rocky Atkinson is at SportsMemo.com. And if you've been a viewer last year, you've heard us enough on this weekly show. We did it all summer long. The expertise that these guys have in NASCAR. If you're a new viewer, check out the episode today. Maybe follow along if you're not ready to jump in. But if you are ready to jump in, now's the week to do it because this promo code expires when the Daytona 500 goes this Sunday. And that's Chase21, a $100 discount for a full season of NASCAR Best Bets from Andy Lang at WagerTalk.com and Rocky Atkinson at SportsMemo.com. And Andy, before we get into Daytona, let's do one other little segment here, a little bit of housekeeping work from last year. Viewers of the show remember the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Award, And one of the reasons the show is back by popular demand, I know many of you viewers out there demanded that it came back, but there was also rumblings in the garage area that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. said he would never crash again if Life in the Fast Lane did not return. So we can now expect Ricky Stenhouse Jr. to have more fiery crashes, more racing stripes, parties on the side, business in the front, haircuts. And Andy, the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Award last year is basically for the biggest blunder of the race. We kind of thought about it, but he made it so easy for us. The very first show we did, the very first race out of the gate at the restart, he was on fire after like lap 1. He might have actually been on fire before even lap 1, but the TV cameras picked it up on like the cool down, warm up, 1 to go lap. And it was off to the races from there. I think he was on fire maybe 4 or 5 times. That'd actually be a very interesting future prop if anybody can find it, is how many times Ricky Stenhouse will be on fire this year. I make the over under 4.5 maybe with a little juice. But Andy, give the viewers, especially the new viewers, a little more history on the Ricky Stenhouse Award and maybe a story as well.
Well, we were coming up with different segments on what to do with NASCAR after the COVID restart. And we tossed around the idea of like, hey, NASCAR can be so funny at times. And like, what can we do to bring up like what's the funniest thing that we see every week, or what's the biggest blunder? And so we threw out Ricky Stenhouse, who just is always running into something or somebody, pit crew members, tires, walls. And so we threw out the idea of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And the first week we introduce it, Ricky Stenhouse catches on fire early so we knew we had something. And so every week we'll do is we will take notes of all the goofiest and funniest things and the biggest mistakes. And we had some doozies last year. I mean, we had some absolutely incredible winners. So every week when you tune in, we will give the funniest or biggest blunder of the week.
Yeah, and I want to let the viewers know we are open to nominations on Sunday night and Monday and Tuesday. We're going to be doing this show Wednesday each week, as we are this week. And hit us up on Twitter. We'd love to have your nominations and advice, because I think what we'd like to do is maybe each one of us gives out a pick, and then we'll have you guys decide, maybe through YouTube or through a poll or through comments. We're still kind of working on logistics there, but we'd like to get the viewers involved as much as possible. I'm at Steve Merril, 2 R's, 1 L on Twitter. Andy Lang is Bump Sports, and Rocky Atkinson is Rocket Man Sports. So once again, Bump Sports, Rocket Man Sports, Steve Merril on Twitter. Follow us and chime in after the race or even during the race. We can keep a running tally on Sundays, and I have a feeling Ricky Stenhouse Jr. will be in the running quite a bit. Rocky, just a quick takeaway on this. If you had to give one look-ahead award for the entire 2021 season, who do you think the Ricky Stenhouse Award will go to, maybe other than Ricky Stenhouse, big picture?
Well, I would say John Hunter Nemechek, but I don't think he's racing in the Cup Series this year. He was about to take it from him last year. I don't know. It's up in the air. There's some drivers out there that gets mixed up, like a old time Jimmy Spencer, Mr. Excitement used to do. Ricky Stenhouse, I mean, he's going to win it a lot this year. I don't know who else to throw out there right now.
Yeah, and Andy, one final thought on this from me is this isn't always like the B or C league racer. I'd have to go over the list. I don't think Harvick won it last year. I know Hamlin won it at least once, if not twice. He had tungsten. Actually, I became smarter. I know. I became smarter because of him. I Googled the element during the race. Who thinks NASCAR fans aren't educated? Because I looked up tungsten. It's one of the heaviest known minerals or metals, whatever the hell you want to call it. But it fell off his car. And that also was a warm-up lap. And it put a big hole in the car behind him. So, yeah, I mean, the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Award is not just reserved to the B and C league guys. I mean, we had basically everybody but maybe Harvick, I think, won it last year. There was like a top 5 or top 10 rate. I think Chase Elliott won it at least once or twice. Blaney won it a couple times, I believe. So, yeah, Andy, any nominee for Stenhouse of the Year and any other final thoughts here on this one?
I might look at Chase Briscoe coming in trying to prove a point with the Stewart-Haas Racing. That has all the makings of him overcooking it into a turn, forcing the issue, especially when he's on the team with Kevin Harvick, wanting to try to impress somebody. So I think Chase Briscoe could be a dark horse for the award for this year.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of Harvick's team, I forgot to mention Clint Boyer, one of my favorite drivers of all time. I believe he is in the booth this year, correct, with Jeff Gordon. So he is also retired. So we lost Jimmy Johnson and Clint Boyer, a couple other big names. Guys, I'll tell you what, let's get into Daytona because it's the Daytona 500. And it's a little bittersweet for me, guys, because this is the Super Bowl scene. It's one Sunday after the Super Bowl, so it's good timing. Yet, we always talk about how week one of the NFL is kind of like week 5 of the preseason, and we see results that never correlate to the rest of the year in the NFL. It's very difficult to handicap. It's the same thing with NASCAR. I mean, it's ironic that they call this the Super Bowl of racing because I think you guys will agree this is the most random race of all other than the Talladega restrictor plate track. And, when you look at this track, it's very difficult to handicap because it's almost always decided on the final turn of the final lap, usually in overtime because there's a big crash on that final turn before they go to the green, white checker. And with that said, I mean, how do you guys handicap Daytona? What's some big picture takeaways? And for the viewers out there, we're going to look at the following races on the cookie cutter tracks that make up most of them the mile and a halves in the upcoming weeks, a lot differently than we're looking at this track. But there's still odds out there. There's still some value out there. Andy, I'll start with you. Big picture takeaway for Daytona 500. And for the new viewers, by the way, this is a restrictor plate track. There's 2.5 mile tracks. It's Daytona and Talladega. They go so fast there that they have to restrict the air intake of the engine with a restrictor plate on the carburetor. And the cars run in a clump because of that. And they're basically bottled up the entire race into the last lap when someone gets aggressive and makes a move and usually causes several cautions and wrecks. So, Andy, with that lead in, and that the uncertainty here, how are you approaching this race as a handicapper?
Well, I've learned over the years that the best thing to do is just bet on restrictor plate races. I know that's very lame to come out and say, hey, let's bet on NASCAR. Well, except for the first race of the year, but this is such a crapshoot. And it is so entertaining to watch that sometimes you just want to be a fan and you want to watch it. We all know there's going to be several big wrecks, and a lot of them happen at the front. And it just makes betting on the race really, really hard. So they will put out head-to-head matchups. And what's funny is you'll notice that like everyone's the same odds. It's like everyone's minus 115 against everyone. Like there's no favorites. Maybe they'll have Denny Hamlin a little bit of a favorite. But, one thing that is fun to do with this race is daily fantasy. So if you have a DraftKings or FanDuel account, this would be a really good race to try and wet your toes into NASCAR gambling. But head-to-head matchups, I won't have anything. I will say that if you want a sleeper, Michael McDowell is in a lesser car and he struggles on the mile and a halves. He loves restrictor plate races, and if you hear a lot of drivers who are in better cars talk, they love racing with Michael McDowell on the restrictor plate races. They love the way he pushes. They love the way he drives. And because of that, you see him team up with some of the better drivers. And the last, 4 Daytona races, he's got the third best average finish, 11.5. So if you want a dark horse, that's good. But Denny Hamlin's going to be your favorite on the books, and for good reason. He always runs good here.
Yeah, and Rocky, that's what's so ironic about this race. We talk about it's a complete crapshoot. All the head-to-heads are basically pick 'em. And I will say, if you look at the history of this over the last 10, 15 years, we've had several drivers at 50-1 or higher a couple different times, win this race. I remember Trevor Bayne back in 2011 or 12 or whenever it was. He was 100-1. He wins the race. He's never won another race since. Ryan Newman, 50-1, won a race once. We look at other guys like Ward Burton from South Boston, Virginia, near me. I remember him winning it back in the day. The biggest takeaway for me, and it's a perfect example of like Michael McDowell, is Michael Waltrip. When I got into NASCAR in the late 90s, early 2000s, Earnhardt Jr. and Michael Waltrip were winning all the restrictor plate tracks. Jr. could compete elsewhere, but Waltrip couldn't even be a top 10 driver at another track. And they just had figured something else back then before everyone else caught up. With that said, though, Denny Hamlin has won 3 of the last 6 Daytona 500s. And he's the favorite at 8-1 for that reason. So it is random, yet there's certain guys like Hamlin, obviously, who have figured out how to run well here. And I mentioned, some names earlier, like the Penske boys, Blaney, Keselowski, and Logano. Keselowski's been a lot better at Talladega, but he knows how to run restrictor plates as well. So, Rocky, with all the randomness, there are certain drivers that do better than others here on these types of tracks. How are you approaching the Daytona 500? How do you handicap these restrictor plate tracks in general?
Well, for many years, I'm like Andy. I didn't didn't release picks on at Daytona or Talladega. I mean, it's just anything can happen. I mean, it's always an exciting race to watch. They're flying around there, and you're going to have some big ones, big wrecks. No telling who's going to win though. So past couple of years, I started giving them picks out at Daytona, Talladega, done quite well. But actually, several of the winners were actually I was lucky. So this year, I think I'm gonna go back to not releasing picks at Daytona and Talladega. It's very hard to handicap, like you said. There's drivers that do run well here. If I had to choose one driver to win the race this week, it will be Denny Hamlin. He's got the numbers. He's won 5 or 6 times here. Some long shots that I'd like to look at. Chris Buescher in the 17 car. He runs well. I do a track history. It's the first thing I do every week for NASCAR when I'm handicapping a NASCAR race. And I've got him 4th for track history with the formula I use that I created myself. William Byron, he's another driver to watch out for in 24. I got him 5th. Eric Jones, he's in the new ride. Maybe has something to prove. I've got him 7th in my track history formula. Michael McDowell, already been mentioned. I've got him 15th in my track history formula. That's good for him. He runs good here. You won't believe this, but keep a close eye on Bubba Wallace for this race. Bubba in the new car, I have him 10th on my track history formula results. And if you look at the results at Daytona over the years, you're going to find Bubba Wallace is number 3 with the average finish of 14.9 with best average finish. Ahead of him, Justin Haley. I don't think he's running this year. He won the race. And John Hunter Nemechek, who's not in Cup anymore, I don't think. So you got Bubba Wallace, who has 6 top 20 finishes in 7 races here at Daytona. So usually we're talking bad about Bubba this weekend. He's one to watch. I mean, but overall, I'm going to stay away from the head-to-heads this weekend. Like Andy said, let's sit back and watch it. Let's enjoy it, and go with Andy's advice. Play FanDuel or DraftKings or something.
Yeah, and I'm a big practice time guy, and it was killing me last year when we didn't have practice sessions. So I kind of had to learn to handicap a little differently, as we talked about on the show last year. And I know, Rocky, you rely heavily on practice times as well. This is one, whether they had it or not, it wouldn't have mattered to me because Daytona just doesn't mean anything. And even, like you said, even the past track histories, it's just randomness. I do like to look, guys, by the way, at like top 10s, top 20s, and then take out the did not finishes, because half the time these guys are in big crashes, they don't finish. That lets you know which guys are in contention to win. And then you look for the long shots, as Rocky said. And Andy, going back to you about like fantasy, you brought up an excellent point. You want to play long shots here. This is definitely one race where you can have a big score in the daily fantasy because anybody can win the race. And one other thing I'll point out about daily fantasy is most of them, like DraftKings and the others, have a positions gain, +1 or -1, depending on your starting spot. You definitely do not want to play anyone in the top 5 or top 10 because there's no upside reward. There's a tremendous downside risk. What you're looking for is a guy that can contend or has been strong at Daytona in the past that's starting in the 20s or 30s because you can get 20 spots just by them finishing the race ahead of everyone, who crashes. Andy, it's interesting that he mentioned Bubba Wallace because he has been respectable these tracks. And if you look at Daytona and Talladega combined, the 3 non-finishes, you take those out, his last 12, he's been 8 of his last 9, he's been top 20 or better. So he stays out of trouble for some reason. But, Andy, I got to throw this name to you because this is your guy. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is better at restrictor plate tracks. He is the modern-day Michael Waltrip, if you will, as he's barely top 10 anywhere else. But Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has won at Talladega. He's been competitive at Daytona. Andy, what are you doing with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. this week? I think there's something there with him on these tracks. But the odds makers have caught on to that as well.
Yeah, Bubba Wallace was fastest in practice today, by the way. And also, I'll throw this. Do you remember 2009, Brad Keselowski, a driver nobody knew, comes up from the Xfinity Series and leads 1 lap at Talladega, the final lap, to get his first career win. That race vaulted his career. So anything can happen on these restrictor plate races. Ricky Stenhouse, no. He does race good here. I cannot argue with it. I will wait and see where he qualifies. So with people like Michael McDowell and Ricky Stenhouse, you're hoping for horrible qualifying if you're playing daily fantasy. You want to see him like back in the 30s. Because people like racing with them. They do good on these tracks, and if they move forward, you can get those plus minuses. But no, with Stenhouse, as always keeping your eye on what he's about to do. So, but no money on Stenhouse for me this week.
And Rocky, I want to get your final thoughts on Daytona. One other angle I want to throw out that is something to look at from a handicapping perspective is there's drafting. That means the cars kind of like bumper to bumper, and they can draft off each other and get save fuel, and also kind of slingshot by the other guy. So teamwork comes into play more on these tracks than any other type of track. And that's why when Andy said Keselowski, it made me think of Penske once again. I hinted at this earlier in the show, but I think that's the strongest team heading into Daytona is Penske, because Keselowski's won at Talladega. Logano has won the Daytona 500. Ryan Blaney has led several hundred laps the past few years on the restrictor plate tracks. Team Penske looks really tough to me, Rocky. And then also Gibbs Racing, of course, with Hamlin and some of those other characters. Kyle Busch is a name we haven't mentioned yet, but he's been strong. And his brother, by the way, Kurt, has been excellent, has won the Daytona 500, I believe, as a big long shot. Also, the Busch brothers might not be teammates, but they're still brothers by blood. Rocky, how much do you look at teammates and teams in general, and anybody might work together well?
Yeah, you definitely got to factor that in, because in the end, all the teammates, they're going to try to line up, and they're going to try to draft with each other if possible. You'll notice here in Daytona, some of the guys will go back to the back of the pack from the start of the race to try to avoid that big one, and then they'll hook up with their teammates and make a go for the to the front. But yeah, teammates, they hook up. They look to hook up. Same manufacturers usually try to work together. So it's going to be interesting. I just recommend a pass. Check all of us out on Twitter. I'll probably put up some maybe some head-to-head matchups that I like, but I'm probably not going to bet any money on them, just so you know.
Yeah, once again, please follow all of us on Twitter. And once again, chime in with your thoughts on the race. And more importantly, chime in with your nominees for the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Weekly Screw Up of the Race Award. And tweet us on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday next week. We'll keep them coming, and we're going to each give our nominees on next week's show on Wednesday. Once again, my Twitter handle is Steve Merril, 2 R's, 1 L, Steve Merril. Andy Lang is Bump Sports. And Rocky Atkinson is on Twitter, Rocketman Sports. And once again, don't forget about this fantastic offer we have for both handicappers, 2 NASCAR experts, both have hit nearly 70% of matchups over the past year. Andy Lang, WagerTalk.com, Rocky Atkinson, SportsMemo.com. $100 discount for each one of them for the full NASCAR season. You will not have to wait. The minute they release a play, you get it automatically. You don't have to check back every day to see when the bets are up. And by the way, guys, this is very important because NASCAR is a beatable sport. It's a smaller market. That means the lines move. That means you want to get this information the minute it's released. That's even more of a reason than ever to have a direct subscription. And if you do it right now, you're getting a $100 discount, the lowest price. That works at the lowest price per play for the entire season for every NASCAR best bet for both Andy Lang at WagerTalk.com and Rocky Atkinson at SportsMemo.com. Once again, must have the promo code that's available on this show only for all of our viewers, all of our loyal viewers, Chase21. Chase21. Get you that special price for the full NASCAR season. And guys, we'll be back each and every week on Wednesday night with Life in the Fast Lane. Next week, Daytona Road Course. We'll still be in Daytona, but it's a much more handicappable race as we had the road course last year, so we have some data to look at. Always fun to talk road courses. We're going from the fastest, biggest track to the shortest, slowest track within 1 week, and they're not even leaving the venue. It's pretty incredible. And then the week after that, we've got Miami, which is the ultimate cookie-cutter mile-and-a-half track. About half the races this year will be mile-and-a-halves. That's where the real money is, guys. And you don't want to wait. Get that $100 discount right now with Chase21 at both WagerTalk.com and SportsMemo.com. Hey, Andy, Rocky, thanks as always for being with me. And viewers, thank you especially. Be sure to interact with us on Twitter. And also, thumb up, subscribe, and leave a comment below here on YouTube. That's what keeps these videos going here for free on Wager Talk TV. Comment below and let us know your thoughts on the race, who you like. And then after the race, comment as well. Let us know who you think the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Screw Up of the Race Award should go to. Once again, we'll be back next week on Wednesday night right here on Wager Talk TV. Until then, enjoy the race this Sunday, and best of luck.